In this next lesson, we're going to take a look at how to establish a supplier record within X3. In X3, a supplier is any business partner to whom you would issue purchase orders to buy raw materials or other products. A supplier is also a business partner for which you can register expenses. So to set up a supplier, if you go to your Common Data menu, then under BPs, then we're going to come here to Suppliers. And just like we saw when establishing a new customer, when we're setting up a new supplier, we're going to want to remember to click on this new button. So when we're setting up the supplier, the first thing that we're going to specify is the supplier category. And these supplier categories can be very useful insofar as you can define a lot of default values associated with the category. Default values to include statistical groups, payment terms, accounting codes, account structures, default dimensions, and the like. So we'll set up the category. In this case, we're going to have a US category assigned. Adjacent to that, we have an active box. So if there ever comes a point in time that you wish to discontinue business with a supplier, you can uncheck the active flag. It's important to note that if you still have open payables on a supplier's account when you deactivate it, you're not going to be able to clean up those payables off the account until you reactivate it. We have a supplier identification number. This number can be manually defined by a user, or through the supplier category we can have an automatic sequence number assigned. Down here on the Identity tab, this is where we're going to come to establish, the company's legal name is specified herein. If we want to specify a short title and an acronym, these elements can be useful when we're searching on a supplier. We have a country specification, a default language that we want all the business forms to be presented in, federal tax ID number and SIC code. We have a currency setting down here. This is going to represent the default currency on all AP vouchers that we load for the supplier. Any purchase orders that we register for the supplier is going to have this currency as a default. Down here in the inner site section, we have an inner site flag. This would be used in the case where if a company is multi-site, in one site purchases goods from a supplying site, we can go ahead and set those up accordingly. Over here on the addresses tab, this is where we come to register the addresses for the supplier. So it's commonplace to have an address code of 001. Sometimes folks will refer to it as the main address. Sometimes folks will use the remit as their address code. Whatever code your organization decides on, just make sure that you're consistent in its use, and that will help you from an inquiry and reporting perspective. Over on the right hand side, we set up our address information much like we do in any other business partner screen. Telephone and email addresses at the bottom. The default address right here is important insofar as this represents the address that's going to appear on the purchase order that you register for the supplier. Next, here on the Commercials tab, we have an ABC classification that we can assign to the supplier. If the supplier places any minimum order requirements upon you, that can be registered herein. We have a setting here for multi-line order. So if you wish to be able to issue a purchase order to the supplier for which there's multiple lines on the PO, it's important to want to have that checked. The next two settings here are with respect to our reminders. Reminders to if your organization pursues acknowledgments from your suppliers. If you wish to be able to send your supplier reports to remind them of upcoming deliveries. We have a setting in here. On your supplier, you have a price list structure that you can define. We'll talk about this price list structure to a greater extent when we take a look at our purchase price books. Down here in the text section, when you have your supplier established, you can come over to this text block here, and this order form and return slip, these blocks here relate to these settings here. So for instance, if whenever you issued a purchase order to one of your suppliers, if there were certain maybe terms and conditions or certain say delivery notes that are important to communicate to your supplier, you can come under this order form block to specify that. Here in the lower left-hand corner, we have a reporting block. This is where we can come to specify our expectations in terms of reports when we're conducting business with the supplier. If we want to print out purchase order forms, if we want to generate a receipt note when we receive inventory against a PO to the supplier, if we want to automatically generate a return slip whenever we issue goods back to the supplier. We have a template code over here. This template code follows the same principles, basic principles that we discussed when we discussed template codes on a customer file. Over here in our receipt section, this is where we can come to specify an unavailable calendar for the supplier. So again, if you wish to set up a holiday calendar, indicating the dates that the supplier does not conduct business or has scheduled plant shutdowns, we can set an unavailable calendar there. Here we have a default carrier associated with any purchase order that we issue to the supplier. A default delivery mode where we can declare, the standard mode of transit is by rail or by road or by sea. This location would be used in the case if the supplier was a subcontracting supplier. Okay, and we wanted to be able to keep track of our inventory at that supplier's location. Your Incoterms section is where we can specify if the terms of sale are X works, DDP, CIF, or so forth. We have a couple fields here that are unique to organizations that are doing business within the EU. Here in our due date basis, so this relates to when the due date clock is going to start ticking on invoices that we register from the supplier, whether it be we want that to start on the date of the receptions of the inventory, or if we want those to start based upon the date of the invoice. Here in the discounts and charges section, this is where we can come to declare any fixed charges that are associated with the supplier. So for instance, if I tunnel into this element block here, I have these charges, these invoice elements. I could come in and specify for freight charges. I have a standard freight billing amount of $100. Okay, then that would work to ensure whenever I issue a purchase order to this supplier, that PO is going to declare that I should be charged $100 worth of freight. Next, on our management tab here, we have a supplier type here. Typically, your suppliers are going to be set up as normal suppliers. If you have a qualification process of sort that the supplier is going to need to go through, you could set that new supplier up as a prospective supplier, and that will prohibit the entry of purchase orders to the supplier. The supplier could also be set up as a miscellaneous supplier, which would be appropriate, to set up a miscellaneous supplier if you have a lot of suppliers maybe you only do business with on a one-time basis. Okay. Then through the use of the miscellaneous supplier, you can just declare, the business name and the address when you're issuing the PO. Okay. If you want to record your customer number in, your supplier issues you a customer account number, you can go ahead and declare that in this block. We have a rate type section down here, which would be useful if you do business with the supplier in a foreign denomination. Okay. There's multiple currency exchange rate tables that you can establish within X3. And this rate type is basically pointing to you which one of those tables is applicable. This matching tolerance block, this matching tolerance concept can be used for cases where if you have a supplier that habitually overships you product, maybe habitually ships you products too early or too late, or maybe overbills you for products, one can establish matching tolerances and set them upon the supplier to prohibit the entry of a purchase receipt or a purchase invoice that falls outside that range. We have a credit control block up here. The credit control typically has a little bit more application on the customer piece side, but nevertheless, you can also establish a credit line on your suppliers. It might be applicable if you have a supplier that kind of holds your organization very tight against the credit line, and you want to kind of monitor, the amount of credit exposure that you have with that supplier. That credit block can be useful. We have a payment hold setting right here. So in the event that you wish to prohibit any further payments to a supplier, maybe in the event that there's a dispute of sorts, you could go ahead and use that setting to accomplish that. We have dispute settings down here. This warning setting, what that will do is when you're entering in a purchase order to the supplier, it's going to give you a warning message indicating that there is problem with the supplier's account. So oftentimes what I'll see is that this this warning flag will oftentimes be used in conjunction with these supplier notes down here. So on these supplier notes, you could specify the reason for the problem with the business. And whatever you declare in this supplier notes box will kind of splash on a splash screen to the user when they're entering in a PO. Then finally, we have this hold setting right here that's going to prohibit the entry of a purchase order to the supplier. Okay. Just like on the customer side, we have supplier statistical groups, which can be useful to, maybe segment your suppliers by industry segment or maybe by the type of product that you purchase from them. You can establish price books based upon the supplier stat group also, another common application. Over here in our financials tab, in our BP section here, we have an invoicing BP and a pay to BP. Okay, so this is again the supplier ID at the top can represent the supplier to whom you're issuing your purchase order. If you get the invoice from a separate BP, maybe the organization's parent company, you can declare them as the invoicing BP. The pay to BP is going to represent the business partner to whom you're issuing payment whenever you do business with this supplier. In most cases, these three identification numbers are all going to be the same. We have a supplier group, which again can be used for statistical reporting. We have a risk BP if we want to, again, consolidate our risk levels, kind of say at a parent level as opposed to the subsidiary organizations that we're doing business with. Over here in this accounting code block, this accounting code that we define, this is going to govern both the accounts when we enter in an invoice from the supplier. It's going to govern what AP collective account is charged, as well as what the offsetting charge to account is, whether that be an expense account or say an unvouched liabilities account. in the context of our raw material vendors. This account structure field here, this kind of takes the accounting code to additional level. Your expense accounts that are associated with the supplier can be defined herein, and through the accounting structure, what makes it a little bit more powerful than the accounting code is that you can define multiple expense accounts on it, as well as multiple dimensions, analytical dimensions. Next down in here we have a 1099 indicator that we can set on the supplier. Okay, so we have a variety of different 1099 form types we can define. And on those form types we can also specify what box on the 1099 form needs to be populated for the payments that we issue to the supplier. Okay, and there's a whole 1099 processing features within the software that we'll take a look at in some of our later lessons. Down here in the payments block, this is where we specify the payment terms. If the supplier entitles us an early payment discount, say if we remit payment to them within a truncated time frame, we have a payment bank that we can set. This payment bank is going to govern the bank account that funds are going to be withdrawn from when we issue a check or a wire to the supplier. We have a tax rule section over here. So if there's any use taxes or just taxes on purchases that we need to define, we can set that in the tax rule. We have an analytical dimension block down here where we can, again, define default cost centers, default project codes associated with the supplier. Okay, so this analytical block can kind of work in conjunction with our account structures. Next, over here on the ranking tab, this is on this tab here we kind of have a spider matrix here. And through this, what we can do is, if we have different means of grading our supplier, maybe we grade them on how well their lead time is versus other suppliers, how affordable their prices are, the level of their quality, the amount of goods that we can purchase from the supplier. We can come through this section right here and assign a numeric grade to each one of these elements to establish a total rank. So for those right-brained individuals within your organization, you can kind of look to the spider graph here to see how strong your supplier is. Next, on your bank ID number, so if there's default bank account information that you want to define on the supplier, that can be specified here in this block. Then, just like our other BPs, we can also define our contacts on our supplier record. So if I wanted to define a new contact, I could double click in my code field, do a tab, specify their surname, their first name, define their role within the organization, define the department in which they're located, then all the rest of the address, email, phone, and fax information. Okay. Other things here on the supplier record that you'll see is that we can set up, purchase price books. If we have, contracts with the supplier, you can access the purchase price books with the supplier through this button. In addition to that, when we get to our discussions of setting up product files within X3, on our raw material products, we can specify who the default suppliers are that supply us with those goods, and we can obtain that list through this button right here. Once we have the supplier set up, especially if we have like an approval process that the vendor needs to go through, we can go ahead and print out what we call the supplier record. So under here over on our print icon, we can come down to the record option. And in here we have the supplier record. So in here, when we go ahead and do the print on this element, that's going to come over here and pull up this crystal report, the supplier record report. All your management information, your grading information, contact information with the address. Another common report that you might utilize, again through the print icon, you can come to list. Then in here we have a supplier listing report. So here, when we come in and do a print on this one, we can actually do it for a whole range of suppliers. That'll give us a listing report like this, which might be particularly useful, especially, maybe to print it out on a yearly basis if you go through some type of periodic review of all your suppliers so you can see who you're presently doing business with, or maybe right after you convert the suppliers over from your legacy system. This can be a useful report to print out too, for auditing purposes. One final thing to note on your supplier files, over here in the right list we have a variety of different inquiries that you can run. Inquiries for requests for quotes, for purchase orders, your purchase receipts, your invoices, your returns, and all your respective accounting information. So kind of X3 will provide you with a nice 360 view of all your open activity that you currently have outstanding with the supplier. In addition to that, through this actions block here, you can create new purchase orders, and you can create new invoices all right from within the supplier master file.